Can you go ahead
I'll
and
be right back. I have something. Hang on. Don't go anywhere.
whatever you need to do? Okay, so a couple new announcements, and I'll see this over on the book club page as well. Um, so this book has had the absolute atrocious attendance that we have ever had. Like, I don't know if it's the content, the book itself, the difficult read, not sure. Um, so I'm so sorry about that. It's not a book club book. And every book that we've had before, oh my gosh, you got it! I love it. Stephanie got hers too. Oh, it's so pretty. I love it. Oh my gosh, how cute are you? Oh, you look beautiful. You picked the perfect color too.
Thank you. I saw it in my mailbox today. I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm gonna wear it.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. So I wanted to start with I apologize about the content, only because I feel like it's been a really difficult read for a lot of people, and I did not know anything about the book prior to starting it. No one is alone in that. It's been difficult material for me as well, just because reading about so much pain is hard. And so I understand a lot of people privately message me that they're having a hard time following along, they're hard time getting through the material, they're behind, blah, blah, blah. So that's why the group is so small tonight. Going forward with that kind of information, I think, I'm so sorry, Emily is here. By not learning about the past, we are doomed to repeat it. I 1000% agree. That is why I was so on board with it initially. I was like, well, there's got to be something we can gain from this. And why Erin, her idea was that if we were going to do this platform, we wanted people to be able to pick any book they wanted so that we all could expose ourselves to new reading. And I was telling Jenny this, her concern that she had expressed that she was like having a hard time following the material and it's not like her normal genre. And I've gotten that across the board, except for maybe Emily, you seem to be able to really follow along with it better than most. And I think Stephanie has really enjoyed the content as well. Everyone else, including Erin, not enjoying, not having a good time. Udi, you've been pretty good with following with it too. So long story short, I think what we're going to do is we're going to do this wheel. We're going to see who gets to pick our next book. And when we do that, I thought I would ask for 2 book submissions, and then I could go through and see which one of those 2 would be best for discussions to make a choice from that, just so that it's a book that people would enjoy analyzing. Maybe this book is a book that you would love to read to learn from, but maybe not discuss in a group. Does that make sense? I guess I'm just having a hard time figuring out why such poor attendance, and even the person that picked the book didn't even come. So it's just like, oh, what did I do wrong with this one? So I'm going to share my screen and grab my little wheel. Oh boy, guys, bear with me. Can you see the screen? Can you see a little wheel? Oh, I see you guys nodding your heads. Yay! Okay. So yes. I have people that came last time and the people that are here this time that have never chosen a book yet. And we're just going to press the button and it's going to pick one. You guys ready?
Yep, good to go.
Patricia, woo! You should play the lotto. Like, you always have a really good result. You always get picked from me.
Okay, I actually have one, and I'm really excited to read it. And I was hoping that I would be picked to do it. I can come up with the second one, but this is the one that I really want to read. It's called The Deep by Nick Cutter. It's a horror novel.
Ooh, how cool is that?
It's I can send you guys the description. I really want to read this one a lot, and I'm so excited to like read it with you guys. But I will come up with a second one just in case that one doesn't work.
Oh, good. Oh, stop share. No. That sounds like it would be really on point for everybody. right, Emily? She really should play the lotto. Honestly, every time we do a
Yeah.
team draw or something like this, you always win. It's so cool. Okay, so that's exciting. And if you send me the title and the stuff in the description, um, I'll go ahead and look into it. And as long as I can find like a book club that's covered it previously, then we are good to go. I'm totally on board. Um, Next thing I wanted to talk about is that just a moment for the people in the Holocaust and everything they experienced and all the generational trauma that's tied in with it and everybody else that's being persecuted right now. Just a little moment to send out all of our good energy and love and light and healing to those poor people. It just breaks my heart. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and get started with some questions. So, Stephanie, I'd like to start with you because you put in your question first. So, thank you so much for contributing. You wanted to talk about if we were in this particular position ourselves, would we be able to keep the hope that the Kleinmans did? And I added on that in my analysis, I only see Gustav having that hope. And he kind of uses like a faith-based hope. So if you were able to hold on to hope, what would your hope, what would be driving that? I guess is what I would love to know. And then we will go ahead and I believe we will start with Patty, since you are at the end of the alphabet here. Or no, Stephanie, and then we'll go to Patty. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So, yeah, I think it was just Gustav, but yeah, I think his is faith-based too. I think I could keep the hope in just that, one day that pain would end, that suffering, that I would get to see my family and friends again or something. I would just have to hold on to something because if you lose hope, you lose everything.
You're such a unique individual. You always hold on to a silver lining, no matter how much despair. I admire that so much about you. You always find a way. How about you, Patricia? What do you think you would do? Do you feel like you would hold on to hope?
Listen, I don't know because like I'm reading this and it is really hard to digest. And I feel like I'm losing hope as a reader. So I can't even imagine. And I mean, I've done a lot of work on something called radical acceptance. I've spent a lot of time trying to accept the things for what they are. I cannot change them. I feel like I would be more inclined, like maybe if I had a family member, I'm not at the solo dolo. Maybe it was my mom. But I mean, honestly, I feel like after if I were Gustav or his son, after hearing about my wife and daughter, I probably would have gone straight to like the center line, to be totally honest with you. I don't know that I would have been able to continue.
I appreciate your candor about it because I felt the same way and I kind of felt like, I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings too. Thank you for being honest about that. How about you, Udi? Do you have I can see Fritz holding on to his last family member. That I get, like the way you pointed that out. But where's the dad's like drive coming from? Especially after Patty just said like he knows that his wife and daughter. You know what I mean? Like, how would you handle that? What do you think you would do?
I think the fact that, his son is still there, like, even when his son died, uh, like, he still held on to hope. Like, he never recorded that death, and I feel like that would be me if I was in his place and that was my kid. I feel like that. But me as a person alone, yes, I am a very hopeful person. I'm a very lovely person. I would like to think that I would get out and survival would be the driving force in me as to what would drive me, not necessarily hope or religious. It would be my own survival and my kids' survival, or my own survival and my mom's survival.
Right. I'd like to challenge you. a little bit and play a little bit of devil's advocate. With a trauma like this, do you ever feel like there is a survival on the other side? Like, do you think it's possible to ever get past it?
Yes, I do. Um, but I don't know. I don't know if I could get past like as much as they've gone through. Um, but I'd like to think I could, just because of what I've already gone through as a person. I would hold out hope that I would be strong enough to do that,
Yeah,
especially if I had someone with me who had it almost seems like they almost have the same thing, but for different reasons. Like Fritz is more for the resistance, like he really wants to get behind that and do something, and Gustav wants to keep his head down and do something that way.
right. I have so much
Yeah,
respect.
I like it. Thank you.
How about you, Jenny? Have you given any consideration while reading it and watching like all the atrocities happen? Like, have you thought, oh, I don't think I could survive this? Or do you think like I could just keep my head down and get through it and get on to the next part?
I mean, I don't think that I would have that kind of hope like Gustav does. I do think I would have tried to get away like early on, like before even being sent to the camp. But if that wasn't an option and I was arrested, I would have been one of the early ones trying to escape, and I probably would have been shot. So, but I don't think I would have had the patience to just kind of wait it out like that or survival. As far as the trauma goes, I don't process trauma very well. I mean, not that anybody does, but some people do better than others. Um, and I don't think that I don't think that I would have been able to really have much of a life afterwards, even if I did get out after going through that. It's really interesting to see how different people process trauma so differently. I mentioned last week about my surrogate mom was born there, and her parents were like polar opposite. Like her dad was just always so positive and happy, and it was like you wouldn't think anything like that had ever happened to him.
Right.
Whereas her mom was like this bitter, angry, just hateful woman. And I know she'd been through a lot, but at the same time, she was just so nasty to everybody.
The juxtaposition between them was very obvious. The way that she was like, if you don't go hide, I'm going to, kill everybody and turn on the gas while we're sleeping. Where he's like, we'll be fine. Everything's going to be okay. I'll turn
Yeah.
myself in. I see that. I see the difference between the drastic difference between the two is interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about my surrogate mom's parents who actually were there.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Whereas like afterwards, I mean, obviously I didn't know them then, but her dad was just, even years later, he didn't seem like a traumatized person. He was just a happy-go-lucky guy and,
uh-huh.
was super sweet to everybody. And her mom, like, just was this bitter, angry old woman who just hated the world. And like you could see, that the trauma really did affect her that way. I don't know, but I don't get the impression that she was like that before all of that. So
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting what happens to people through it. How about you, Emily? Do you have I love your thoughts on this and your viewpoint, especially as a writer. What are your and he kept a journal, so we know that this is a true account of his positivity. It's not like a post looking back type of viewpoint. This is what he felt as it was happening. So what is your take on it?
Well, excuse me. The majority of what I have read, as far as World War II and Holocaust goes, has all been like first person accounts. I've been fortunate enough in my life to have met some Holocaust survivors. Corey Ten Boom, I got to meet her. She was the author of The Hiding Place, which was one of the books that I had posted in our group. If you kind of like this sort of thing or are interested in learning more, then those are some other perspectives. I think, though, that for Gustav specifically, we have to consider the acceptance of generational suffering, because I think that is where Gustav is coming from. Because if you think about it, they say in the very, very beginning, I wasn't here last week, so you guys, we didn't talk, I wasn't part of that discussion, but in the beginning of the book, they state that they're not particularly religious. They're not overtly so. So they don't really participate in synagogue beyond what Kurt has decided to participate in with choir or things like that. He does perform the Shabbos on Shabbat, and so we see that, but it's driven by Kurt. It's not really driven by their parents.
Right.
So I think that Gustav comes from that perspective of this is just how it's been. I mean, we know historically that the Jews were persecuted and spent 40 days. You have all of those stories from that historical record and from both the Torah and from the Christian Bible. So there's that acceptance. And so he's kind of accepted. Oh, she's so cute. I love little pigtails. Sorry.
I know.
We see that generational suffering and that acceptance of it. But I think also that Gustav holds on to that hope that Kurt is safe, that Edith is safe because they've already sent her. He knows she's in England, so he's holding on to those hopes that if we don't have hope, we have nothing, right? We're dooming ourselves to death, whether it's emotionally or physically or spiritually. We're dooming ourselves if all we are doing is assuming the worst. If we don't hold on to any tiny bit shred of hope, of goodness, of survival for either ourselves or our loved ones, then we are dooming ourselves to death. So I think that's kind of where he's coming from a little bit more.
I really like your take on it and your insight, because honestly, from my point of view, while I'm reading it, if I'm thinking, and I really hope this isn't offensive, this is just my true feelings of, I would never participate and march my way to being enslaved, to build my own gas chamber, to follow orders of people that were going to abuse me. I get the familial of him and his son. That is about the only thread that I'm holding on to. Otherwise, I'm mystified why no one here is killing themselves.
So, well, you remember they state that some of them do, because you have that dead zone. They call it a neutral zone. They did it also after they built the Berlin Wall.
Right.
There was a section that they call the neutral zone, but really it's your death zone. And they would purposely step off the path, or they would purposely put themselves into it because they couldn't take it anymore. I think it's interesting to consider fear makes you do some pretty crazy things that are outside of your normal thought process. And I think that in the case of the Holocaust, and in the case specifically of how notoriously horrendous Auschwitz, Birkenau, Buchenwald, all, and like Mauthausen was, they were so severe that if you did anything, if you stepped out of line at all, they would beat you, they would shoot you, they would do all of these things, and you would be an example. So you're fearful of, well, if I step out, then am I going to be the next one to catch the bullet, or are they going to shoot the person next to me to teach me a lesson? Well, I don't want to be responsible for somebody else's death. So yeah, they have that psychological manipulation and fear tactic. And you also then have that, what's the word I'm looking for? That mob mentality.
Yeah.
If everybody just keeps their head down and everybody works together and everybody stays focused and everybody lives with this hope, then I'm not going to get you killed and you're not going to get me killed.
Like a sense of community, camaraderie.
It's a community responsibility. And I'm sorry if I don't mean to talk so much. It's a topic that I have done a lot of research on. So
no, I was having like a lot of internal conflict with figuring out like why that wasn't happening. So that does make sense. I think I would, for other people, on for the survival of them. So thank you for opening my eyes at least, because I'm just baffled by why so many people they don't do. Stephanie had also asked, would like to know, do you think Gustav and Fritz get liberated by the Allies, or do you think it's one of the other? Do you think they get out, and how do you think they get out? And then I'll go. I mean, obviously something happens as this stuff comes to the surface, and we'll start back with Emily. And do you think it's those allies that are there trying to?
Well, I read the preface, so I know a little bit kind of forward, because it says in the preface that they encountered every single step that occurred within the Holocaust. So they start at Buchenwald, they go to Auschwitz, they're then sent over to Mauthausen. They go on that death march. And if you know anything about the death march, I don't know if you guys do, but they literally, in order to avoid the Allies coming in and freeing them and seeing what they had done and were doing, they marched them through the forests and murdered them along the way. So, but then at some point, you know, some of them are then, there were groups who broke off and were hiding in the forest and then are rescued by the Allies. So it's hard to say whether they make it to another location and then are liberated, or if they're liberated while they're in the forest, or if they didn't go on the forest part of it on the death march. And I don't know. I'm interested to see how it came about, because they're the only story that we know of where they have been through every single step of the way and that they both survived, which is so rare, especially given Gustav's age at the beginning. Because when the Nazis went into Vienna, they had already been in power in Germany for 5 years. So all of these atrocities were already started. They had already learned about a lot of them. So to then see how it's all happening for them, and to see that, you know, Kurt has gone to the States, and his experience as that refugee is interesting. So I'm curious to see how it all turns out for everybody, because I don't know their whole story.
Me either. I'm very curious about that as well. As far as we've made it so far, I was kind of presuming, like Stephanie, like I kind of was guided towards there's going to be like a backdoor way out for Fritz. It's where we are right now, because he knows too much. You know, like he knows too much about what's happening there and what they're doing. I'm thinking they're going to have to get rid of him somehow. How about you, Jenny? Do you think they're going to get liberated by the Allies, or do you think they'll stay until, like, you know, the war is over? Or do you have any thoughts on how they're going to get out?
I mean, I think it could go so many different ways, you know, like Emily was saying. It really depends on where they are and when, you know, the timing is everything, because there were so many who didn't get liberated until long after the war was over. So it really depends on where they end up correlating with what timing. I mean, I hope that they get liberated sooner rather than later, but no way to know.
Yeah, my thought.
If there's time towards the end, I would love to share a story that relates to all of this. I don't know if that's acceptable. If not,
absolutely. How about you, Udi?
I'd also like to think that they get liberated as soon as possible, but I'd like to see if they, like Emily said, the prolong. I want to see if they make it all the way to the end and hear that story, because we haven't heard it before. You know, it's something new. But I really hope that they do get liberated and do survive, and they all meet up. That would be so cool.
Yeah, that's the only little slice of hope that I'm having right now. I do hope somehow that happens. How about you, Patricia? Hi, sweetheart. You're so cute. Can we all just
Thank
take a
you.
moment and
She's like trying to eat my book that I'm trying to get the book club to read right now. But mine's getting a copy. So I've been thinking about this one a lot, and I I kind of hope in my heart that the way that they get rescued is from their German comrades who were like, this is awful. What's happening? I'm really, really hoping that, between them, and then I think they were trying to get to a place in Poland. I can't remember. I'm really bad at like pronouncing this stuff. But I'm kind of hoping that like that German comrade of his that helped smuggle in the guns and the letters, I hope that maybe he pops up somewhere, or, some of the other people that, oh, you're okay, sweet girl. Like the German civilians who were like, whoa, this is crazy. Because like, I'm going to go on a little tangent for a second. Because this whole time I always thought that every German everywhere was for this. And this book is my first exposure to being to hearing about civilians and people who are like, what the fuck is going on? And then I think I used to think, well, how could the Germans like see all this and think it's okay? And then there was that, hey, ma'am, that passage about how like they kept everything so beautiful, and there was flower gardens and beautiful places to like sit and picnic all amongst it. So it makes more sense now that I have gotten this exposure that maybe not all Germans were Nazis, and maybe they're going to help Fritz and his father out.
Well, my eyes are really open to not all prisoners were Jewish. There's a lot of like political and reporters and things like that, which has been eye-opening to me, because when we went through the election before the last one and the George Floyd uprising, I did a lot of advocacy, a lot of political marching, and a lot of it. If things would have gone in the direction that this did for the Nazis, like what happened with the Nazis, I would have been in prison. I was one of those people during that time. It's just I had no idea that those people were in the camps too. I don't know why I didn't consider that, but I didn't. How about you, Stephanie? Since this was your question, do you have hope that the Allies will get them out, or do you think it would be some other way?
So I'm hoping it's the Allies, but like what Patty was saying, maybe the Germans do find a way to get them out somehow. I'm really hoping either that or the liberation somehow. I'm just having hope, even though there's very little. But I think there's going to be some kind of a twist in there. There usually is at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're usually right. It ends up being something very good and hopeful. And I'm really hoping we're left with that, and the turmoil and emotions that we're feeling while reading this serve a purpose. So that brings me to my next question. Oh, look at Nicholas. Everybody has somebody so cute. I'm just waiting for one of the rats to come out. So funny. He's the cutest underbite ever. So my question was on a serious note, with Emily's statement. It was a really good segue to this that she had put in the chat, that if we don't learn history, then we're doomed to repeat it. Tell me your ideal or your theory on why we keep repeating it. Okay, so like, it's happening now, like even though we're not calling it the Holocaust, even though we're not calling it Nazis, it's happening all over the place. It keeps happening. It keeps getting worse. Some of us know about it. Like, why are we still in the same loop? And we'll start with Stephanie. And if you have a solution of an idea of how to stop it from keep happening, I'd love to hear your input.
You mean what's going on now?
Yeah, or what's happened since then. Yeah, all the different persecutions.
So I don't really, that's a hard one. That's a really hard one. I think if people were kinder to each other and actually tried to put themselves in other people's shoes and know that we're all interconnected in this world with the earth, with animals, with each other, I think it would be a much kinder place if we all would actually just try to be kind to one another instead of trying to kill everybody. But I understand that with, let's say, with, I'm just going to use an example, the climate crisis, and if there's less availability for water or food, people just want to survive. But the racial and, all the racial discrimination, I just can't wrap my head around it. I mean, we're all human. I can't understand it.
With your husband, Robert, being a historian and studying things like this, has he ever commented on to you, like, why this seems to be so pervasive in our society, why this continually keeps happening? Is it the fear of differences between people? You know, I just wondered if I'm sure he's unavailable now, but maybe in the chat later, he could you could tell us what his theory is on it.
Do you want me to get him now?
Oh, you don't have to, but if you'd like to get his opinion and put it in there for us, I'd love to know.
Okay. Okay. I mean, give me
Or
1
he
second.
studies it. How about you, Patty? Do you have any thoughts on it? Like, it just like constantly keeps happening.
So I have a couple of things that I want to say in regards to this. So I agree that, first of all, if anyone sees my boob, I'm really sorry. Let's start there. Hopefully you guys don't see it, but if you do, I'm very sorry. I want to say that I agree that, if we do not learn about the atrocities and even the warning signs of these terrible events in the past, that it is doomed to repeat itself. However, I do also want to say, for anyone who was not able to join the meeting tonight, it's also, I understand if you need space for yourself, and I don't want anyone to feel like they're penalized or, anything like that. But it's one of those things where, like, we are literally witnessing massacres in Palestine. We have children in cages in the United States of America. And I actually had a conversation with my grandfather the other day. He's not my grandfather, but my husband's grandfather. And it was talking about how Palestine didn't have only had like 10 Olympians to send or something like that. And he's like, it's awful what they're doing to those children out there. But if they would just, and then it was just the whole children are getting murdered, there's people dying in the streets, was completely glazed over. But if they would just, a child that's getting murdered has nothing to do with any fucking political agenda. I think that it is easier for us to find some reason, something to, like, oh, well, that's why it wouldn't happen here. And it's hard because, like, you feed your brain, it's almost like poison. You're feeding yourself all these awful images and all these things, but in a way, I feel like if we don't continue to share the atrocities, how many times did you guys see George Floyd die on the ground? I saw him die 100 separate times. And that spoke to me. It spoke to all of us. And I'm not saying that we should be like out there like filming every single person that's having a crime done against them or anything like that. But like that exposure that this can happen right in plain daylight in front of me, in front of my kids, I feel like is the only way that things are going to change. But I don't know, dude, because it's scary. It's awful.
It's terrifying. I agree. I 100% agree. Udi, you and your sweet little rat. I love them so much.
She did want to come out. This one's Big Mama.
Oh, Big Mama. Hi, baby.
Yeah.
I thought you were calling me Big Mama for a second. Like,
no, I didn't. She wanted to come out. She's the only one who did. Ghostface made an appearance and then decided no.
Oh.
He ran back in, but she wanted to come out.
Oh my gosh, I love these babies.
But I honestly don't think we're going to change. People love power way too much, and to get there, there's going to be collateral damage. And unfortunately, we're the bottom of the food chain. I feel like, the lower and middle class, it's all going to be higher upper people.
I think Emily made a good point in the chat about media and their responsibility in all of this. And I think there's a lot of propaganda and the messages that were being fed. And Patty, you also said, like, how many times did you see him die? How many times do we hear him say, like, that they were on his neck and he was crying out for his mom and things like that? How many times are we subjected? And we have such media overload, so much media toxicity. And what's really weird is if you just, whether you're a Democrat or in the middle or a Republican, take a day and watch the news sources from each side. And it's like, what's being fed is just so different and so just swamped in information that's not 100% accurate. And like,
isn't that crazy?
It's like a distortion.
It totally is. I agree with that. Wholeheartedly.
Yeah. It's so unfortunate. How about you, Jenny? Do you have any thoughts on it?
So I think there's two primary things. I think people are afraid of what they don't understand. And I think a lot of people don't make the effort to try to understand. It's easier for a lot of people to believe whatever they're presented with without thinking for themselves about it, like sheep. And I think that so much of the horrible things, not just the Holocaust, but so many things that have happened in history going back further than that and more recent than that have been because of that, literally just the fear of what you don't understand, or what you don't know. The other thing is that unfortunately there seems to be this human nature that, and I don't know why it's some people and not others, but so many people just feel the need to be randomly hateful. And I see it, now that we have social media, I see it like every day. There'll be a random post about something, and so many people just feel the need to be hateful to someone who's asking an innocent question about whatever, and so there's so much anger, I guess it comes from. I don't really know what else it would come from, but some people just have like this internalized hatefulness that they need to take it out on somebody, and they just pick whoever is available and take it out on them. And like we see it on social media, as far as just people just generally being hateful in comments, and then obviously more awful things like what happened to George Floyd. But that's, historically that goes back, as far back as we have recorded history, where there's always been some minority that others are hateful towards. We saw it in this book with that civilian, I forget his name now, didn't believe, that was kind of like the sheep mentality. And thankfully he was able to see finally what was happening. But remember, he didn't believe that they could possibly be there without having committed a crime. Yeah. And initially kept saying, no, you must have done something. You wouldn't just be here for being Jewish. Like, he genuinely didn't believe it. Thankfully, he was, a nicer character than a lot of people. And once his eyes were opened, he was, really kind and helpful to them. But so many people either were completely in the dark and just believed the propaganda. And I think that was the case, not just in the camps, but throughout, Germans and Austria. And they were just completely oblivious. And then so many other people just wanted a scapegoat to take their anger out on. And okay, the Jews are bad, so we'll be angry at them and treat them, like less than human.
You brought up a really good point about people being so angry. And I think it, like you said, I think a lot of it is that generational trauma, like has trickled down. It's in our blood. I mean, they say that we hold the pains that our mother and our grandmothers have felt. Like, each person, more and more of that generational trauma lives inside of us. It's just, it's embedded in us. It's just, we need to do something with that energy that's positive, not negative. That's a really, really good point. You're right. And so much propaganda. Emily, I know you have some insights on this, and I would really, really love to hear it because there's so much education that you have that we all can benefit from.
Um, well, as far as whether or not I think we'll be able to, as a society in a world, heal and get rid of some of that, unfortunately, I don't see that happening to the degree that we would like to. I think it's important to remember that of all the problems that we have within society on a world scale, we have a heart problem. I always say I have a CCW, so I don't agree with most of the gun control things and all that stuff. So, but we don't need to get into that. My point is that we have a heart problem. It's not really a violence problem, it's a heart problem. So you have to get to the root of what those causes are. I think that it's important to look at the fact that the way that we do have social media and we do have media up our noses on everything, we have to remember that even if it claims to be unbiased or it claims to be bipartisan, it isn't. It is always skewed. Our own views are skewed based upon our own life experiences, our own atmosphere, our own education, all of these factors come into play. And unfortunately, instead of looking at, okay, you have a different education, a different experience than I do, so what can I learn from you? People instead have this focus of self. So it's, what can I teach you? What can you learn from me? Not what can I learn from another person's experience? What can I learn from another person's perspective, or their religion, their upbringing, their education? There's also that fear of that loss of self. And so I think that is where a lot of hate comes from. It's not so much you're different from me and so I hate you. I think that I forgot who said it. One of you was saying it's the that we fear what we don't know or understand. And I think that that's a very true statement. We are fearful of that only because we don't understand it. But without being open, we're not able to learn. But also, I had a couple of notes. There's that desensitization of violence. So seeing things over and over and over. I'm Gen X. I remember the Columbine, school shooting. And we saw videos of that on the news. Like, you saw it repeatedly. It was the same thing with Waco. We saw that on the news over and over and over again. I was born the same year as the Jonestown massacre in Guyana. But I've seen those all over the internet. You see those pictures and you hear those stories. And I am fascinated with those types of things because it is a form of brainwashing. So the use of propaganda through the news, through all sorts of media. We saw this evident in the propaganda that the Nazis dropped on Vienna. And if you think about it, Vienna is the capital of Austria. So we're not talking small town, right? We're talking a capital city. I mean, Austria is not massive as far as a country goes, but my husband's being a dweeb out my window. Sorry. So they're dropping these leaflets on this massive city. Well, that is propaganda. So they were getting inundated with this. And so if you're then watching people be, shot and tortured and beaten in the streets, you're going to be a little afraid to speak up. And we're encountering that now. I mean, with all of the riots that we've had since COVID, if you just look at that alone, just look at the riots that we've had, we're seeing things happening in the streets. People who are defending themselves are getting, major backlash for it. People who aren't defending themselves or other people are getting backlash for it. And so I think that to get away through that, to get past it, we have to stop focusing on self. But then at the same time, we have this focus lately on mental health, and then we're all trying to focus on our own mental health, that we can't help others until we help ourselves.
Right.
And so there's this balance that we are unable as a society, I think, to really truly be able to find, because at the heart of it, we are selfish. All of us are at the heart of it, if you really think about it.
I think so too. I think we have a healthcare crisis. I think we have a mental health care crisis. I have a question for you. When we talk about the protesting,
Mhm.
what is your thoughts on, and I'd like to hear anybody's input that has one, the insurrection that happened on January 6th, or whatever we want to call it, when the Capitol, after the election. Do we consider that a political protest in the same way that we would other things that happened prior to that? Is that grouped into the same? Like they said they were going to lynch his vice president. What was, I've already forgotten. Trump's vice president Pence. They were going to lynch him. They had a noose for him. They hid. Like, is this propaganda? Is this in the same hatred thing that would happen with like the Nazis? Is it a way of like overtaking the government? Where do you think something like that? Because we're so close to that with this next election. It's really important to discuss and like in a respectful, intellectual way. I'm just curious what everybody's thoughts are, starting with you, Emily. How do you feel about that?
So I personally tend to be very middle of the road. I am the kind of person, I vote based upon different subjects. So I am not a red no matter what or blue no matter what. Like that is just not how I operate. But I think that what we are seeing, it feels very similarly to a lot of people's perspective of what we see having happened during World War II, specifically within, Nazi Europe. I feel that it is a little bit different, but I think the reason why it does feel similar for a lot of people is because it is so emotionally charged in both cases, right? But it's different at the same time. Our views will change based upon our own experiences. So somebody who maybe has experienced a lot of discrimination may view it as an attack on them, right? Your views that are different than mine, that's an attack on me because I've experienced a lot of directed at me discrimination. But if I haven't experienced discrimination directly at me for specific things, my sexual orientation, my race, or anything like that, then I'm not going to see your difference in opinion as being an attack. I'm just going to see it as a difference of opinion, and maybe you're a little bit more emotionally charged in expressing it than I am. Maybe mine is a little bit more rational. I'm a very emotional and dramatic person, but I'm able to step back and see things from an intellectual and like realistic, I guess you could say, perspective. I don't think it's the same. I do feel that as far as the January 6th stuff goes, I feel that it was a political protest. I think that there were some within a group, whether they were Trump supporters or not, I don't know. I know that there were some people that they did find were at some of the Antifa events and then also at January 6th. And so it's hard to figure that out on who was the instigator in that, really. I mean, you don't know unless you were actually there, and I wasn't there. But I think that there were some people, as there are with anything, who take it too far. I don't care. I felt the same way. I did not vote for Obama the first time around, or the second time I didn't, but um, it still bothered me then when you would get people on social media who would start saying that, oh, well, I just hope that, somebody assassinates him. I was like, what? What? Like, where do we get this from? Like, how is that where you get just because you don't like somebody politically? And I think that's where I think that's our dangerous standpoint. That's that line, I think, that is getting crossed on all sides, because we're not stepping back and having a conversation that is calm and logical.
Yes. The reason why I wanted to bring this up and why I thought it was such an important question to include here is because I know it's so complex. But I recently saw the president or the writer of Project 2025, who's from the Heritage Foundation, being said that this doesn't have to turn out bloody if they don't want it to be. That is a threat. That's a scary threat. What my fear is, no matter who wins at this, in my honest opinion, I don't think who's president matters one iota. I think we're so far removed from that at this point with all the different things that happen in Congress that it doesn't really make a difference. My fear is that we're on the brink of civil war, and that if who doesn't win or whoever wins, it's going to cause this eruption of retaliation. That's my biggest fear. Similar to what happened on January 6th, if that would have been allowed to go, or if that would have happened in a non-contained area. It's so close to what happened the night that one night they were sending the things for the guy for Austria, and then the next day Hitler was coming, and then all this horrible stuff happened, and all these people came out from under the ground. It's like, how close are we to that? How do we prevent that from happening? What kind of discussions do we need to have to think about that? Do you know what I mean? I guess that is where my fear is at. I think you made really good points, Emily. It's happened with so many presidential elections in the last 15, 16 years. Like, basically since I've been into politics and a voter. It just seems to be getting worse. We're just escalating, you know. And also you have to also think about the media and what they're portraying, and like who really was there and who wasn't, you know. Jenny, do you have fears of what happened in this book unfolding maybe in November? Is that something you've even considered or thought about?
As a severely disabled person, it is a huge, huge fear. For two reasons. One, because Trump has come right out and said that all disabled people should die. And that's just a horrible thing to hear. I feel that my life is valuable, and even though I may not be able to do a lot of things most people can do, that doesn't mean I'm not a valuable person, you know. And then less direct, but with the same effect, is wanting to take away Social Security. Disability doesn't pay much, and I struggle to keep a roof over my head. But if they take away Social Security, I'm dead. I mean, you know, I will get evicted, and I am mostly bedridden. When I sit out here for an hour and a half, that takes all my strength, and then I'm back in bed for the rest of the night. So I can't survive as a homeless person. I mean, I could not physically do that. I can't physically leave my house without help, much less, you know, live on the streets. So if that happens, I'm literally dead. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. And it is, it's really terrifying to think about that so many people are supporting this person who genuinely wants people to die. I mean, to me, it's very similar to Hitler. There's, you know, just so many similarities. And there's so many other groups that, you know, will suffer from this also. But just speaking from my own experience as a disabled person, it is utterly terrifying. Just really, really frightening.
Yeah, you make amazing points. It's besides the terror and the civil war that could unfold, there's also things where people who are disabled are going to be greatly affected, or elderly people. Those are where my fears are. I really don't care who they elect president. Honestly, I just don't want anything to get worse because it's already so bad. How about you, Udi? Have you thought about it while reading this book? Like, holy crap, we're really close to something like this.
Oh yeah. I think we've been on the brink of this for a while. I'm honestly, we've all been preparing because we get fires out here all the time. So we're prepared to pack up and go if anything happens. I was taught how to use the land and to grow potatoes. So grow potatoes if you guys can. That'll sustain you. But yeah, no, I definitely see what is happening in the world, and in our United States alone is crazy what's going on. I think a great reporter you guys might like is Andrew Callahan. I don't know if I've talked about him before, but the Channel 5. And he actually talked to that dude with the headdress that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And he's very interesting, and I think I follow more in his line of political views, like and Emily, like I'm in the middle. Like I can see where both sides are coming from, but I don't agree with what is being done on either side. Like I don't want him as a president, and I'm glad he stepped down. And I don't know if I want Kamala as a president either. You know, I'm kind of in the middle, but what is being done on both sides I'm not okay with it. It hurts my feelings, and I think we are close to having another
So close.
war on our hands. Yeah.
They call it like a matchstick, is what they're saying, is how close we are. In fact, we're so close. I saw that the doomsday clock, you know how they're constantly keeping track of how close we are to the end of the world. With Biden stepping down, we ticked 1 second closer just by that one action. As a feminist, just for that sole reason, I wasn't going to vote. I didn't like Biden, and I don't like Trump. But as a feminist, I will vote for her. Do I think anything's going to change? No. Am I terrified what will repercussion because of that? Yes. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. And I respect every single person and who they want to be elected. Like, I don't want to argue about our differences. I want to figure out what our similarities are, how we can make things better. How about you, Patty? Have you given thought about it? Is that like, do you think that might be where some of the uncomfortableness of this book is coming from?
The discomfort from the book, honestly, is just like the raw, oh, they love splitting infants' spines in halves. I will never, thank you. That's too, it's really, really hard for me. I am like very similar to Erin. When Erin started crying because she was like, I don't want to make a change because then it would mean I didn't have her kids. Me too. I'm also crying in the club about it. But it's just like, just the book made me realize, like, I read Night by Elie Wiesel before. I read it in high school. It stuck with me. I think about it literally every fucking day. I think about it all the time. I'm going to get to my point in a second. But in that book, they didn't talk about how women and children were just so easily discarded. This book, if you're a woman, you're dead. You're pretty much gone. And I did not realize that. I had never had this exposure before because I've only ever read books that were approved by some teacher somewhere for a kid to read in school. So now that I have this book that is not, on some, it probably is on some banned book list, let's be honest with you. It's just, I wasn't aware. I truly was not aware. Now, as for the election, what happened on January 20th or January 6th was illegal. It was illegal, regardless of a protest. As soon as you take over a government building, as soon as you take over anything that you did not occupy, that is illegal. The thing that makes me concerned about that is that Donald Trump has mentioned that if he does become president again, he will pardon that. He will make that illegal act completely legal. And then we think back to the election in Austria. And Hitler used his influences to have a legal election. That's what makes me concerned about all of this. You can protest whatever you want. You can do whatever you want until you start breaking laws. I don't care. You can't. And then to go back and say, oh, yeah, that's actually fine because you were doing it for me. I'm going to pardon you, even though it was an illegal activity. That, to me, is a criminal. And so I do get a little worried about, what's going to happen in the future. I am concerned, deeply concerned about how far things happened on January 6th. And it is, in my mind, a direct reflection of what happened in the election of Austria.
It is hitting every single nerve I have. And it makes me, I read and watch a lot of different type of social media. Like I said, I will try really hard to open my mind to Fox News and just sit with it and hear things. And I'll look on TikTok and I'll take in different viewpoints all the time because I don't want a limited perception of this. And just hearing so much of it, it's so similar. And I don't know if that's why Kristen picked this book or not, to like bring our attention to this so we could have like a formal discussion about it. But I'm so glad that we can, and I could hear from everybody's different viewpoints that we all have something different and reasons for it. How about you, Stephanie? I know you've given a lot of thought about. You and I have read Project 2025 together, and we've talked about it in detail. So just, I know you have thoughts. I'd like to hear where you are feeling right now in comparison to the book.
So I'm deeply concerned about where our country is headed, and it reminds me of how everything started with Germany into Austria, and then but it's just really scary because you have someone trying to be a dictator of a democracy, and that's not what our forefathers wanted for us. And it's just sad that there's so much divisiveness right now. And like what Jenny was saying with the disabled, I'm a chronic illness person myself. And that stuff is scary because that's what they were doing to not just the political prisoners. They were doing experiments and eugenics on all these sick people. I mean, it could happen again, and that's scary because there are a lot more people that are sick now than there used to be. And I've even had some people come up to me and say, if things were the way they used to be, it would be survival of the fittest. And basically making people feel like they're a mistake because of something they can't help. And that's not right. Just like with race and discrimination, you're born that way. You should not be persecuted for something you're born with, whether you're gay, bi, any type of sexual orientation, or anything. If you don't have a choice, you shouldn't get discriminated for it. And it's just really sad because I feel like what happened back in the World War II, I feel like it's starting to come true again. And that's just really scary because it's fine to have freedom of speech and what you want to say, but when you start hurting people, that's when it's wrong. And as for the insurrection, I mean, if you're taking over a government building, that's treason. You're going against your country. I feel like you're not a patriot if you do that because you should stick behind your country. But another thing is you also need to not do anything violent, but just you need to redirect all that anger into something more positive, more productive, instead of getting violent.
I agree. In the sake of time, since it's 9 o'clock, there's so many other questions I would love to pick your brains about. Um, two things I wanted to know. First thing is, show of hands. Do we think the mom and the daughter are alive, or do we think that they have died? So if they're alive, we thumbs up. If they're dead, thumbs down. Wow, Emily, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I'm so curious. Oh, I hope that would be wonderful. Okay. Second thing is that I wanted to ask is except Patricia asked, do we think that the family has unification, the ones that are left alive? Do we think that they will be reunited at some point? So if yes, thumbs up. If no, thumbs down. So I think some will. We're kind of like this, yes and no. And then finally, if you have any quotes, I'd like you to share one, and we'll end on that. And we'll start back with you, Stephanie.
Oops. Oh, I was trying to pull my notes up that I have. Let me think of what. Let me find that note really quick. So, sorry, it's taking forever to load.
You're fine. You're totally fine.
Okay. So, mine is, by resisting, it was at least possible to risk everything for something.
Ooh, good one. Good one. Did you have one, Patty?
My Kindle is being a jerk. So I don't have the exact quote, but it was really just about like how the flower beds were like right in the middle of the concentration. I can't find the exact quote right now, but it was just talking about how everything was so beautiful and no wonder no one thought anything was wrong because there's beautiful fucking flower beds everywhere. But
I
my
love
Kindle,
that too. I love.
no.
I love me too. It was a big one. I also liked when Fritz was up on the treetop, like he was fixing something up high, and he could see farmland and like peaceful places up there. Like there were beautiful things going on there, and that touched me too. How about you, Udi?
I don't really have a quote, but the whole when he was doing the thing and he did not give up. Like, yeah, I know he didn't really know anything, but he could have given up the names of the people that asked him to do that, and they do know things, and they could have broke. And could you imagine it would have just destroyed the whole resistance? So the fact that he stayed quiet, that right there was my whole thing. That was amazing. What a brave young man.
Oh, right. I've asked you guys last week who your favorite characters were. And this week mine was Fritz, his loyalty to his father and to those people. It is a
I agree.
his bravery, right? So admirable. How about you, Jenny? Did you have a quote or a theme?
Not a specific quote. Along with Udi, I had that section of note. I really admired Fritz for that. But then it was interesting because there was such a contradiction with those two other members of the resistance that that escaped and then killed two of the members and betrayed everybody. And it was just like, why would you do that? You're out, So it was like Fritz has this intense loyalty and doesn't give anyone up, and they were just willing to, kill their community members, and it's just horrible.
No. How about you, Emily? Did you have anything that really stood out to you?
I think that they're kind of everybody's steadfastness, even regardless of age and circumstance. Like we see it with Kurt, even though, he's there. And I don't know if we've read this part yet, but I looked up quotes because I was trying to think if there was anything that had stood out to me. So we might not have read this part yet, and I'm not remembering, but I just like this quote. So I'm going to share it with you guys. It says, "It took strength of character to share and love in a world where selfishness and hate were common currency." I think that's kind of where we are as a society yet again. It is difficult, because we're raised to, and I think they were too in Austria and in Germany, to think that like our system is a democracy when we live in a democratic republic. So they are not the same thing. They're a little bit different. We have democratic processes, and I think that it's the same there. And so we get comfortable with how things are, and then we get this selfishness that comes in, and that's how we fail.
I agree. I agree. I picked one and it said, yet only through solidarity and kindness could people stay alive for any length of time. And I think that is the truth about it, whether we're at war or not. I think we only get by with the people that we have around us. Our community is so important. Um, I just wanted to take a minute and thank you all so much for coming, for showing up to discuss such hard topics and to do it in such a respectful way. It means the world to me. I thank you all from the bottom of my heart to keep book club going, for your brilliant ideas and thoughts and consideration for each other, and the way that you've opened my eyes to it. So I appreciate your time so much, and I will see you guys next week. Patty, I got your link. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about that. Congrats on being the one to pick the next book. Have a great week. We're going to finish the book, put this sucker to bed, and move on. I love you all. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.